Has home advantage changed since COVID? Let's find out in this video. I'm going to show you how I would analyze this as a data analyst. Okay, so as I say, in this situation, I'm going to show you what I would do personally as a data analyst and show you how you can learn some cool little tricks and skills along the way, how I would analyze this data. Okay, so step one is always the request. So let's just start with the request in here. You'll see the following email where it says, could you look into whether home advantage in football has changed since COVID? Mainly around time of matches played without fans. In particular, we'd like to find out home teams winning fewer matches since COVID compared to before. Does any change seem temporary or permanent? Are leagues affected differently? For example, Premier League, La Liga, and obviously they're not great with Excel, so any simple charts or stats are greatly appreciated. Okay, so now that we have the request, let's break the request down. Okay, so the first thing here is our home advantage in football. That is our key question of interest. That's the most important thing that we're interested in here. Our change since COVID provides us with a pre-post analysis. We know in this case we're going to compare pre-COVID versus post-COVID to give us an idea in there. With COVID being our reference period in terms of we're comparing pre and post that. Again, pre and post COVID is what this first question is asking, basically taking the average, for example, in that period before COVID, and then the average in that period since COVID. Then we've got here, does any change seem to be temporary or permanent? This is what we call a step or a pulse. A step, essentially when you have time series analysis, for example, if you had data going like this and then you saw a dip, a step would be if that data continued to dip and we did a straight line there. So you do along, down, and it would just continue along that new one. Or, for example, essentially setting a new trend. Or, for example, if it's a pulse, it goes along, down, and returns to what it previously was. A bit like what you see, reason called pulse, obviously, is if you imagine it in a hospital, if you've got your ECG graphs, etc., something like that, your machines in there, that sort of thing is what we're looking at. Now that we have that, we can then look at our final thing, which is are leagues differently affected differently, I should say. This gives us a larger sample size, and that basically prevents the impact of any outliers. For example, if the Premier League we had, for example, and 2018-19, for example, was a ridiculously high percentage compared to every other league, then obviously that's going to skew the data ever so slightly. But if we have any other season, I should say, whereas if you've got 7 or 8 different leagues and you've got 5 or 10 different seasons, then one season isn't going to be as impactful as an outlier as the rest of them. And the final thing is here, when they say any simple chart or stats you can provide will be very useful. Naturally, that just means sometimes the visual is more important than a visual graphic's more important than a complex graphic. And what I mean by that is often the work you're going to do is for an executive. An executive summary basically needs to have a graphic that's really easily decipherable. So when I see something, I want to just see the data and see exactly what it's telling me quickly, as opposed to some complex thing they don't understand. They just want to know the data really quick, really visual, color coded, something like that, or a really good graphic they can see very quick and efficiently. Okay, so that gets us on to step number 2, which is the data. And of course, the data is very important for us. So looking again what we've just mentioned there, what sort of data do we actually need? So question of interest, that's just the home advantage in football. So therefore, we want to look for the home percentages, draw percentage, and away percentage results in all of the following years that we're interested in. Our pre-post period, so there's been 5 years since COVID, therefore we should use our pre-period as 5 years before COVID, just to make that make sense. Our step or pulse, essentially, we're going to assess the COVID season. Naturally, I do think that dipped based on the fact there was no fans in the stadium. We want to see, does this set a new trend at the sort of level the COVID season was at, or did it revert back to the trend before the COVID season? And finally, our multiple leagues for sample size. We're going to use the top 5 leagues, the English Championship and the Scottish Premiership, because they are the leagues that I follow the closest, and therefore it just gives us 7 leagues. I could do it with way more leagues, but for the purpose of this video, to make it nice and simple for you, we're just doing it with the 7 leagues in there. The data that we're going to use is from either footy stats or football data. I'm going to show you how you can use both in this video to get everything that you need. And essentially once we've got that, then we have the data, and that gets on to our most important bit. So I'm going to show you both websites now, starting off with footy stats. Okay, so following that link to footy stats will take you to the following webpage, which basically, I've got it set to the Premier League just now, but you can change the leagues very simply by just pressing this button. If you hover over it on the full screen, I've not got it on full screen, that'll give you a list of leagues, and that'll let you use it in there, essentially. Or if you wanted to, you could just change the league here in there, for example. Once you've done the Premier League, you do all the years you need to, then you press leagues and you change your league. And essentially the information we're looking for in this situation is this bit here. Home win percentage, 45% so far this season, 26% a draw, and 29% away wins. And as I say, if you just change the league year, for example, so 24-25 for the Premier League, then you can see that these values change. If we go to leagues, if we make this full screen for a second. Okay, so it's full screen, so you can't see the whole thing now, but if we go to leagues, I can just change that to, like, for example, Bundesliga in there. And then again, if I just scroll down, this home, draw, and win is over here. So that makes sense. That's where we're going to get the data from in this example, but you could also go to football data. So for example, this web page here, and you would normally go to historical data, which I've got it already at. Once you get to historical data, choose the league you want. So for example, Premier League. Once we have that, we'll choose, for example, last season's data, and that will download as a file. Once you get that, you can just, I've got 86 of them, I've done quite a bit of this. But if you open that file up in Excel, then you'll get the following page. Essentially what you can do in here is, you see your thing here, it says full-time result. That'll either be home, away, or draw, and if we just get rid of everything after that, because it's not really important for the example we're going to use here, you can make that full screen in there. And essentially with our full-time result, all we're going to do is going to have our unique options. Obviously we know it's home, draw, and away, but just to teach you something in here, you can have, we're going to transpose it as well, but we'll do that in a minute. If you do equals unique, and then you take this bit in here, this will give you a home, draw, and away. Obviously we want it to be like the other way along, so we're just going to put a transpose in front of it, and all that'll do is revert it to be the other way around, as long as I've spelled that properly. I don't think I have. Transpose like that, and then once you've got that, then you can simply just do this, and that'll give you home, away, draw like this. Then all we're going to do is do equals COUNTIF in this, and want our range, and you want your criteria of the range to be this thing here. Again, you can just fix this. So in there, we're going to fix the range, and the reason we're going to do that is we're going to swipe that along. So once I've done that, you can fix the range, and if I swipe that along, I'll get the whole counts for all three of them. Naturally, what you want to do, obviously, is have a sum of all three of these. So you stick the sum of all three like this. That'll give you 380, obviously. And then to get your percentages, you can just do equals that divided by that. And then if you fix that N2 again like that, and you just swipe that along, that'll give you your percentages, and then you obviously convert that to a percentage in here by pressing that button. That gives us 41%, 35%, 24%. And if we go and check 24, 25 on footy stats, sorry, apologies, I get the wrong name. We go to leagues, and I go to Premier League. I've accidentally pressed on leagues, so I'll just go. I've made the fatal error here of doing this not on full screen. Okay, so I'm on that now, and as you can see, if we go down here, we change the league year to 24, 25, and we get values of 41, 25, 24, and 35, which is exactly what we get here. Obviously, I've accidentally got away first, then draw. Naturally, what you could do is you could sort that in order, but that's exactly the values we need. So you can do it that way if you want to. Obviously, that takes a bit more effort, and if all the data is publicly available on footy data, then there's no need for you to do that. Footy stats, sorry, I should say. Then there's no need for you to do this manually from the football data webpage. But if needs be, that's just another trick of the trade to teach it in there. Now that we've got the data, what I'm going to do is just put that all into Excel for all the different leagues in there. As I said, what we're going to do is we're going to use from season 13-14 to 25-26. That gives us 5 years either way of COVID, because COVID technically spanned the 2 years, 2019-20 when it ended early. And our 2020-21, when almost the full season was behind closed doors. I'm going to get that data now for you, and then we'll come back once I've got all the data. Obviously, you can do this yourself manually, or you can just copy what I've got in the data, but we'll just go along with it from there. Okay, so I've got the data in here. So as you can see, 2013-14 to 25-26 for the Premier League. Got all our figures in there that we need in there. Then we've got the same for the Bundesliga, the same for La Liga, Serie A, and Ligue 1, Championship, and our Scottish Premiership, which gives us all the data that we need in there. Now, I could do some cool analysis on Excel and get this to look quite cool, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to save this on my computer. I'm going to use something else to do the analysis. But let's just go back to our PowerPoint now, because now we have the data that gets us onto step number 3. Okay, so as I said, we've done all this bit now, so all the data steps are complete. That gets us on to step number 3, which of course is the analysis. Now, to do the analysis, you can use multiple different tools. You can use Excel, as I mentioned. You can use Power BI if needs be, but personally, I like to use Tableau. It's what I use at work. So what I'm going to do is simply just map that data in from Excel into Tableau, and that allows us to do any analysis that we need to do in it. So let's get going straight into it, and I'll just show you exactly how you can make this graphics look really cool and answer all the questions of interest. Some of the things we might need to answer in Excel just for quick speed of execution. Sometimes it is fast to do the odd thing in Excel, but let's just have a little look in there. Okay, so for the purposes of the video, I'm using Tableau Public. Obviously, at work, I would use Tableau Desktop and have connection to a server. For those of you who don't know what that means, essentially, obviously, at work, we have a server that reads all the data. We're doing it from an Excel file. So what I'm going to do is, if you press Connect and then press, obviously, when it comes on, press that Excel file, you'll get a pop-up like this. I'm going to press our Home Advantage thing, which is obviously the video that I'm doing right now. maybe giving you a sneak peek to another video in there. Press Home Advantage, and if I just press that as in open it, then that'll take us to the data we need. And that'll then open something a little bit like this, where I'll open book number 1, and that'll give us everything that we need in terms of our data in there. As you can see here, I've got this on a bit of a smaller screen just to show you what I'm doing, but that gives us all the data that we need, so I'm more than happy with that. And then we can go to sheet number 1. What you'll see now is that all the data that we had in there, away, draw, home, and our league and year are all in there. We can then start to do some analysis in terms of making any extras in there that we need to, but obviously, as I say, for the purpose of this, all we're going to do is then just make this thing slightly more graphical. So the first thing that we're going to do, just to have a quick look in terms of anything here, is we're going to just put in our year as a column or a row, your choice in there. You can see here this will have all the different years in there. Naturally, it's a little bit smaller again because I'm not using a full size screen. Once you have that, then we're going to have a look at basically, I think the home percentage is what we're going to want to have a look at. So we'll just take the percentage in there. What we're going to do as well is just our default properties and number format. We want to make sure this is coming through as a percentage. So with our percentage, and then you can choose decimal points. I'm going to put 0 for the purpose of this. I'm just going to make sure that's the same for draw and away as well in there. Just default properties, number format, percentage, and put that down to 0. And again, it's getting a bit boring for you now, but you get the point. Percentage and 0%. Now once we have that, all we're going to do is just have a look at that in there. Again, on a full size screen this wouldn't look as daft, so if I actually make this full size, let me see if this looks any better for you. Okay, so full size looks something like this. I'm going to press fit width because it looks a bit daft, and therefore I can get a full width in there. As I say, you can't really see that as well now, so if I just go back to the smaller screen just so you can see everything on the screen. But you get the point of the video in there. Obviously it looked better on yours at work. Obviously you have the two big screens. I'm doing this on a laptop on a smaller screen, and the amount I can record isn't as big. Once we've got that, all we're simply going to do is I'm going to drop in our home percentage, and just basically want to see how that's changed over time just to get an instant graphic of that. It should be quite easy to have a look at that. So simply all we're going to do is drop home percentage in here as our marks. I'm going to have that as text in there. Obviously, this gives us a sum, obviously, for all the different seasons. We don't want that because, although it does show changes over time, it's not really the most beneficial thing in the world. But all we're going to do quickly here is we're just going to convert that to an average. And we're going to average that over all the leagues that we can see. So now immediately I can see one year that is slightly lower than the rest, and that's probably a good sign to start with in terms of when COVID was. So you can see here 2020/21 was our COVID year when the entire season was behind closed doors, and I can immediately see that, but it looks a bit rubbish if you'd say. So what we're going to do is just do the show me button, and we're going to convert this to a graph if possible, something a bit like this. And naturally what we're going to do, obviously that doesn't look great, but we're going to have our year obviously as the different colours. I'm going to just add our year as columns in there rather than that, and we're going to have columns and then our rows in there, and you can see simply in there that gives us an immediate graphic of looking at it. What I then want to do is I want to colour the year of interest, so our 2020/21, because it looks a bit dingy in there having them all in blue. Want to have a pre and post period and want to colour them all different colours if we can, and simply all we're going to do to do that is just create a calculate field. So this calculated field is simply going to be press that button, create calculated field. Then what we're going to do is we're going to have our colours for our different years. And all we're going to do this is just to have our, essentially what we'll do is we're going to just set some boundaries here. So we're going to have a look at our pre-period. And our pre-period in this instance is going to be essentially if our year is equal to 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17 and 18, these ones here, we're going to use our two COVID seasons here, mainly predominantly this one. We're going to kind of ignore this season because it was 50-50 split sort of as such, and our 5 seasons post is this. So basically we're going to put if year equals, and then 2013/14, then true, else if year, and then etc. Keep on doing that for all the different years that we've got in there, and then we're just going to do that in there. Just copy and paste this, and we can just copy and paste it all the way through. See, that'll be 14/15, 15/16, 16/17, 17, 18, and then we want 18 and 19 in there, else false. End. I've no idea how many ends we need here. Maybe one more. Obviously, need to count how many ends I need. Another end. How many ends do I need? There you go. Obviously, the hard thing here is I don't actually remember how many things I have open. But obviously, once you've done that in there, let me just count how many if statements I've actually got in here. I think I might have too many ends now. Tell you what I'll do actually to make it a bit simpler for you there. What we're going to do is we're going to use else ifs instead. Then we just need one end statement at the end. So simply to do that, we're just going to do the same thing we just did, but I'm just going to put it on the screen now. So as you can see here, we just have our if year equals that, then true, else if, and then it basically means you only need one if statement at the end. And I set one end, sorry, at the end. And essentially this is all of our pre-period, so that's going to be true, otherwise it's going to be false. So our pre-period is going to be there. I'm just going to press OK. Then, for example, in here, if we're just going to filter this to be our pre-period and put that to be true, it should only show the years that we're interested in, so those years in there, which is pretty cool. Then what we're going to do is do the same thing for our post period. So our post period is going to be the same thing. We're going to duplicate that. Then we'll just edit that. We'll rename this as a post period. And essentially what we're going to do for this one is we need 20, 21, 22 is our first season. So 21, 22, 22, 23. There you go. Like so. And then that should give us everything that we need. I feel like I've just actually accidentally done an extra year in our pre-period, but that's fine. We'll just roll with that as we do. Oops. 20, 23, 24, 24, 25, and 25, 26. That should give us our post period in there. If we just check that it's working as well. Then that'll give us true in there. Okay, and that gives us our 5 years. I think I've accidentally put 6 years in our pre-period by accident. I do apologise about that. Let's have a look. Yeah, I've accidentally done an extra year, but that's okay. We can roll with that. It isn't the end of the world. Obviously, it kind of defeats the purpose of having it both the same length, but having an extra year shouldn't make the most difference in there. So now that we have that, obviously that allows us to then just break down our pre and post as images as well and have them more, well, not images, but colourful to give it a more clear graphic. To do this, all we're going to do again is create a calculated field, and we'll have this as coloured bar, for example. And then all we're going to do in this is just a coloured bar. I'm going to put if pre-period equals true, then and then just choose a colour. So, for example, I don't know, red. Then we put else if post period equals true, then orange, for example. Obviously, we can change all these colours later on. It's just hypotheticals. Else we'll have it blue. End. Now, these might not actually make the colours you want, but I'll show you how we can get around that. So we're going to press OK there. What that'll do is put that in from here into our colours bit. You can see actually I've done the actual colours there. So our red, orange, blue. It might not always do that as such. I'm just going to change this because it's annoying me, but I've got capitals on them too. So I'm just going to put that in here. I've just picked the most basic ones, so you'll probably get the same colours I get in there, so blue's actually changed there. What you can do to change these to colours you want is you can just press edit colours in there, and then basically all you're matching is this sort of type name thing to whatever you want, so I can actually make that purple if I wanted to, but we'll keep it as it is for the time being. I think orange and red are a bit similar. We'll go green, that's a bit similar to blue. So what we'll do is we'll go yellow in there, so that should give us our idea. Probably want yellow as the comparative period, and our red and green as our pre and post. Nothing to do with. I think normally what I would do is stay away from these sorts of colours, because I think red, amber, green gives you sort of a rag scale and gives you an idea of more or less, or increases or decreases. So what I'd probably do if I was doing this myself is something a bit similar to this. So I'd probably have a different palette in there. So I'd probably go for something a little bit like this, and I'd have my 3 different scales. So I'd have dark blue. With this one, I'd have more of a lighter blue in this one, and I'll have a purple, or maybe something like an orange in the middle. That gives us an idea there. So it's not, actually I've put the wrong way around. So our orange, sorry, in this case would become the light blue, and this one becomes orange, like so. That gives us a clear, distinct difference. Actually, no, it hasn't, because I've done the wrong way around, but that's fine, of what we actually want to be interested in. So you can see our period that we were looking at for COVID is there, and our pre-period is there, and our post-period is there. Now, all we want to do is have a look at changing the title, because it looks a bit terrible. I'm going to have a look at this at home wins by year. You can see that very quickly in there. Now we're going to make a new sheet in there, and all we're going to do this time is have a look at our away wins and draws as well, just to make this a bit clearer. So all we're going to do is just duplicate this sheet here, and we're going to just do results by year. And by doing that, all we need to do is also put in our draws and our away wins in here. So that and away. And to do that, obviously, make sure you also change this to average as well, otherwise it's going to be mad skewed, like so. Then you'll notice it looks a bit terrible, so we're just going to make sure that we dual axis this. Then it looks a little bit better in there. Or if you wanted to, you could do it as a three-way stacked column chart, like so. That does the years there, but we can actually flip that round, so we can have ours as a little bit different. So we don't really want our coloured thing in there, so our blue, orange, and red. That shows our different time periods. We actually want to do it a little bit differently. We can get rid of our coloured bar in there as such, remove that. That gives us our away, draw, home. We don't really want that, we just want that to be our value in there. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to drop this back to a normal table, like so. That gives us our breakdown of our average home, draw, and away. We want it to be a bit more like that. Home, draw, and away. Again, you would make that fit width. You can see that in there. So you can see your percentages there. But what we want to do is we actually want to get ours broken down by our pre-period and our post-period, and our essentially null in there, the one that isn't either of them. So what we're going to do here is, rather than having our year, we're going to get rid of that now, and we're going to have a look at our pre-period. Our post-period. And of course, we want to have a look at our none in there, so the ones that aren't that important. So our pre-period, if we just set this equal to true, for example, in this instance, we want to have a look at it. So we can just set that as our pre-period, and we want to just have our pre-period and fix that equal to true in there. That gives us an idea. Sorry, one in there. That then gives us an idea of what we're looking at there. So our pre-period, the average home win is about 45%, average draw was about 30%, sorry, 25%, average wave was about 30%. You can format that as well to make it look a bit better. I like to have them nice and centralized just to make it look good. And then what we're going to do then is have a look at our post-period and have a look at that. So I'm just going to get rid of this. I'm going to go our pre-period figures. Now I'm going to recreate this sheet and do the same for our post period in there. So for example, if you want to have a look in there, you can go for post period, and that allows us to do the same thing. So basically replace every pre-period with a post period, if that makes sense. So our post period goes there. I'm going to set that equal to true. Once you got that, you can see this. So you can see basically our pre-period and our post-period don't seem too different. But obviously looking at it in that sort of scenario isn't great. We're going to combine these all at the end to make this quite a clear graphic. And we might also want to have a look at, for example, in this instance, the difference in our pre-period and our post-period. So essentially all we're going to do here is create a new one called our pre versus post. So pre versus post home, and that's simply going to be if. So what we'll do is we'll just create one called pre, and then our pre-home. And simply all this is if pre-period equals true, then AVG home end. I'm just going to recreate these in here as well. So obviously, naturally, what it'll then tell you is that we can't do aggregate the non-aggregate. So I'm just going to put this as home, and then we'll just set this equal to an average at the end. So all you need to do to get by that is just do this, and then when it comes to it, then we put it in our sheet. We're just going to make this an average. Obviously, we want to create a new sheet now that is called pre versus post. Of course, you can do all this stuff in Excel as well, but obviously we want to make this look quite graphical in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to recreate this. So just duplicate this in there. And then once you've got that, you've got your copy. I'm going to just do our pre-draw. Then just do draw in here. Then we can do our pre-away, which is again going to be the same thing again here, but obviously just change that in there to away rather than draw. And then what we're going to do is recreate the entire thing there. I'll just change all this to the pre to post, and then we'll do the same thing for draw and away. Obviously, this bit's quite boring, but has to be done. So post, home, and just change this to post. Once you've got that, obviously you just press OK, and then we'll do the same thing from post home. Again, we're just going to duplicate that, and we're just going to compare our home and change that to draw. And then finally do that for our way. Again, I know that's a bit boring in there, but it needs to be. But it doesn't need to be done. Probably faster ways of doing it. But for a simple guide for beginners, it's definitely the way to do it. So away and get away in there. Now, remember, when we include these, we need to convert these to our percentages. But let's just do our thing in here. So now what we're going to do is our pre versus, create another one called pre versus post home. And simply all this is going to be is our pre home. Actually, we want to do our post home minus our pre home. That's all it is in there. And again, do the same thing in the other two ones. So duplicate that. I'm just going to repeat that for draw. So convert all the homes to draws. As such. Then finally, we're going to do the same thing but for away. So edit, and we're just going to convert that to away. Post away minus pre away. Now, simply once we've done that, we can really easily map this in now. So obviously, we're going to use the same thing we did in here, and all we need to do is just drop in our pre versus post home, our pre versus draw, post draw, and our pre versus post away. Drop them in there as text. Obviously, it will look a bit daft now. Then we're going to press show me. I'm going to do it as a table like that. As you can see now, we currently have no figures in there, so it isn't actually working. So all we need to do for this one is obviously, because we haven't set our pre or versus post to be true or false, all we need to do is then make sure that, for example, our pre-home is working. So remember, pre-home should be the value of 45%. All we're going to do there is go our pre-home in there and just put that in there. And it's got a sum, obviously, of that. If we take our average in there, then there should be 0.45, and obviously convert that and show it as a percentage. But that's absolutely fine. So that's definitely working. So if we just remember in there as well, with all of these ones in here, we want to change default property, number format to percentage. I'm going to do the exact same thing for our pre ones as well in there. Like so. Then obviously we want to do this as well. So we want to do our post home, draw away, pre-draw, home away. And we want to do our default properties, aggregation to be average, like so. Now if we pop that in there, for example, our pre-home should now display as 45%. Perfect. And our post-home should now display as 44%. Now if I drop in my pre versus post home, that's not shown in there, and I don't actually know why that's not working. Let's figure out why that isn't working. Because I haven't put the aggregation in there. So for example, in here, our pre versus post home, if I did just do this as AVG minus AVG. And now obviously this isn't working, so we can just get rid of that and we just pop it back in there. So our pre versus post home should hopefully now display as 0.01. Obviously that's again because these all need to be converted to percentages in there. So we just do that and number format, percentages, and take that down again there. You get our minus 1%, and then we can do the same thing for these two in here. Remember, we need to do our AVG in there and AVG in there, and again just recreate that for draw as well. our AVG, AVG, and that hopefully at this point, press OK. Now we'll have everything we need. We can delete this extra page because that was just used for working out purposes. Now all these obviously will be wrong, but we can just recreate these. So pre versus post home can recreate that, replace that, sorry. Draw can replace that, away can replace that. Now it'll all work, and naturally all we need to do is just drop in our home at the top, then our draw, then our away. And as you can see here, I'm just going to rotate this to be this way around instead, make it a bit easier, and make this entire width. You can see that ever since our pre and post figures seem to indicate that we can actually answer one of our questions, which we'll come back to once we've done our analysis. But essentially, you can see there's not much difference between our pre and post in there. So there's not really any evidence that COVID has changed it for the long run. Now what we're going to do is look for the time period where they're both obviously not true, which is going to be when obviously pre and post are both false. That'll give us our time period that we're interested in. In this instance, what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually completely disregarding the year 1920 because it's not actually applicable in this data set, because what we could do is actually go through and look at the fixtures pre and post the split, but because the data is slightly split in there in terms of when COVID actually hit, it's not fully valid. We're only going to concentrate on 2020/21 as our data set in there. As you can see, it's the year of the biggest dip, but the entire season, which is the more important bit, was the season where there was no fans in the stadium. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use that as our step/pulse. Obviously, you can see here clearly it is going to just be a step because it clearly, sorry, a pulse because it goes straight back up to the percentages you saw before, within 1% either way. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to do our year of interest. So or year of reference period, for example, reference period, or actually we'll just call it COVID year. Simply, this is going to be the easy way of doing this is actually just presetting the year rather than sitting there doing any formulas. All we need to do is just filter the year. So the year in here needs to be filtered to 2020/21. Press OK in there. Then we can put our home. Again, want this to display as an average. Actually, draw and away. And away, again, displaying them all as averages if we can. Text, 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 and then convert all to AVG, or average. Now that we've got them there, again, as always, I think that looks a bit messy, so I'm just going to do this, and then I'm just going to flip this way in here, and then go fit width. And then as you can see here, you can format that, but they are all in the wrong place again, which is a bit irritating. We're just going to put home there, and then it just goes alphabetical order, which is obviously I get why it does it, but it's quite irritating. What you can see now is actually the percentages are quite a bit different from what our year of pre-post was. What we're going to do actually as well, just to make this a little bit clear, is we're going to add in our formulas that we need in terms of, we're just going to take these as calculated fields. So our COVID year home, and all this is going to be is if year equals 2020/21, then AVG, sorry, then home. Remember just to fix this as an average later on. Then just recreate this as well. Obviously, what I'm going to do is duplicate it. Then we're going to do the same for draw and away. Scott McTominay's just scored to make it 2-2 in Inter versus Napoli, if anyone's interested. That draw in there, and then we're going to do the same thing again for away wins in there. So simply we're just going to press duplicate in there as well, and then we're just going to edit this and just do the same thing for away. And press OK. Then now if we just take our COVID year, home, draw, away, and again we're just going to again do the exact same thing, default properties, aggregation, average, and then again take all three of them again, and then just do our default properties, number format, and convert that to percentage. 0, 0, OK, then we can get rid of these. Remember it's 40, 25, 35, and if we just remove that in there, you can take our COVID year home, COVID year draw, COVID year away, convert all these to text, and that's because I've put the year wrong. So obviously in here, that's me being a dafty. So in there, that's because I've done it as dash, and it should just be, so as in a slash should be a dash, as you can see there. We'll just convert that in there, as you can see, and then do it for away as well in there. That'll then give us what we need. So that, press OK in there, and that gives us all the data that we need, obviously, in there. As you can see, again, I want to just show this in a better format, and then fit width and do that, and then you can see everything we need. Again, reformulate this just to have it in the order that you want it in, to be home first. Now what we can start to do is, now that we have all the figures that we need, we have our pre and post period. We want to also convert our pre period to our COVID year and our post period to our COVID year, and potentially we also want to show these as graphs, of maybe a bit more of a line graph, because that isn't as clear as we can. So potentially what we can do here, in our blue bar, we're obviously going to change our blue bit to be post period. Or we can do this and show these as labels, actually, which might be a little bit easier. So we can use it as labels if needs be, or as a tooltip, because it looks a bit terrible. What we'll do actually to make this a bit easier is we're just going to recreate this entire sheet. I'm going to show you what this looks like as a line graph. So something a little bit like that. We'll probably need a bit more of date. Obviously, that doesn't actually classify as a date in the year. That's fine. We'll just stick with this for the time being, just to make it a little bit easier for you guys to understand. What we're going to do is we're just going to delete that page because we can't do it as a line unless we have the date. But this technically isn't saved as date. It's actually just a season. We're going to add in filters now as well, so we can put in the league as a filter, which is very, very simple. Just put that as a filter, and then you can just press all, press OK, and then what we're going to do is press show filter as such. Then we're going to press on this button here, we're going to press customize and press apply. Then once you do that, you then want to do it as a multi-value drop-down list. Then in here, I can just filter this here just to be the English Premiership, for example, Premier League. Press apply. You can see that in there. Now, these figures I think are a little bit harder to see, so we're just going to press a label. I'm going to press show mark. Mark labels, again, obviously I'm using a smaller screen, so it's probably a bit of a better fit on yours. All you can see here is if I then choose then just League One, for example, then it shows me the figures there. And as you can see here, this is quite stark, so there must be one league, for example, because Premier League and League One both have really, really small figures here. Right, COVID season. But then obviously you can have a look in there and you can have a look at all the different leagues. Or for example, if we just look at these three leagues combined, the averages, then that gives you the averages in there. So again, that's not really actually any correlation in that those three leagues. Press apply and that'll give us all the data that we need, as I said, just to make it a bit clearer. What we're going to do now is compare our pre-period to our COVID year and our post-period to our COVID year. So to do that, all we're going to do is do pre-period versus COVID, and simply to do that, all you're going to do is just go and do pre-period. So our COVID season, COVID year home minus pre-period home, or it was called pre-home, for example. Again, make these AVGs if you can. And again, do the same there. And that is COVID versus pre-home. Then obviously recreate this for all the things that we need to do in there. So we'll just duplicate that. I'm just going to rename that again in there. We're going to rename this COVID versus pre-draw. And simply obviously these two just change to draw and draw. COVID versus pre-away. Again, just do the exact same thing, and then you get the script by now. A lot of this is quite repetitive, but you get what I'm doing. Away and away. Then I'm going to do the same thing for these three. I'm just going to duplicate them all and just call these, obviously, the pre just changes to post. So, for example, here, just press off that, for example. I'm going to edit this one and just change our pre to post. and do the same thing on the other two here. So again here, edit that one, change pre to post, and finally we'll do the same thing on this one over here, edit that one, and just change that in there to post rather than pre. And then now we should have our pre versus, so our pre and post versus the COVID year, which is slightly more stark. So our pre-period versus COVID year is these three right here. Drop them into there and make them all text and then reorder them, for example. And again, what's really important there again is we need to just do this thing again we did before. So we're going to convert them all to percentages and default properties, format as percentages. There you go. And that's actually quite stark in there. So our pre-period, if I just show you this as a thing, this is quite a clear graphic, as you can see. If I just change this again up here and you just fit width again in there and again make this a little bit better, format that, and you can just take that in there again, reorder them to fit, and then away it goes in there. So we can see here initially off the back, as you can see that in our COVID season, our home wins were down 5%, which is, I think that's quite a stark amount. And obviously our away wins are up 5%, and draws actually stayed the same at 0% difference. If we recreate this entire page, but all we're going to do is just change our pre again to post. As you can see in here, post, all we're going to do is then change everything we need to change over. So our COVID versus post home, COVID versus post draw, and COVID versus post away. And as you can see here, in our post period, obviously, as you know, there's only a 1% difference between our pre and our post, but you can see that our COVID versus post is obviously COVID was down 4%, and our COVID versus away was down 4%. Again, the draw seems to have been fairly consistent throughout all the 3 years, 25%. And then obviously our pre-figures was 25 and our draw was 25. So fairly consistent, but you can see our home and away wins. So we can clearly see that COVID obviously did impact that in terms of our home advantage, but it looks to have got back to the point it has. Fairly consistent over a number of leagues. There are obviously leagues where this is more prominent than others. And as you can see by this bit here, we're just going to hide this in there as well. And we're just going to hide card. Now what we're going to do is convert all this to all of the results that we need by including a dashboard and looking back at all the data that we thought we needed in our initial thing, and that allows us to do our next part of our PowerPoint. Okay, so once the analysis has been done, this is when you get on to step 4, which is the results, and that's what I'm going to show you right now. If we go back to the questions of interest, which is the thing we're most interested in here, since you want to look at home advantage in football, has it changed since COVID, mainly around the time of matches played without fans? Our home team's winning fewer matches since COVID than before. Clearly, no, it hasn't really changed. It's gone down, up and down 1%, so there's no clear indication there of any clear difference. Does this any change need to be temporary or permanent? So obviously, since COVID came in, obviously there was a change, but this seemed to only be temporary. And as soon as fans came back into the stadiums, this seemed to revert back to what it was originally. And are all leagues acted differently? Obviously, we can see over a bunch of different leagues, there seems to be a fairly strict pattern. However, there is obviously differences between the leagues, where some leagues are more prominent in terms of the difference than others, and that's what we're going to look at next. Okay, so clearly now what we've done is we've completed all the steps we need to do to answer this question. You can see clearly with instant graphics what we're looking at, and now we're going to make these look a little bit better and put them into a dashboard that allows us to answer these questions to an executive very, very quickly. Okay, so let's go back to Tableau. Okay, so we're going to just go here and press new dashboard, and we're just going to call this raw data. Obviously, I'll change this later on. I just panicked there and called it the first thing I think of. I want our home wins by year percentages, and I am going to make sure this is an automatic size in there. And I like to have mine as, it's quite hard to do this on a smaller screen. I'm going to make this big screen for a second. You can't see it on the screen now, but I press something called float, and if I just move it along, I can't actually show you one here because the screen isn't big enough, but there you go, floating in here. I like to have it floating personally. I like to just organize it personally how I like to organize it. But home wins by period, you can pop onto the screen here, and that gives us our league, what's it called? Filter as well. So we can have a look at that in there. We want to probably add a year filter as well, so we just go back to that sheet if I can find a way of doing it. Home wins by year. Probably want to add in our year as a filter as well, just in case we need it. Again, do the same sort of thing in there. So we're just going to do this. Show filter. Press this button on the side. Customize. Apply. Button on the side again, and then do multiple drop down. Then what I want to do is go back to my dashboard that I've got here. You won't see it here. You press this, you press analysis. You can't see that on the top, but I press analysis. Our filters, and we want to do our year in there like that. Again, we're going to take this and we're going to do the same sort of thing we just did. We want to do this, customize, apply. Even though we just did this, but it's just the way Tableau works. Now we're going to drop this up here as well. Obviously, you'll make this look a little bit cleaner when you're doing this for an actual person, but I'm just doing this as a quite quick thing. So you can see here, I want to move this a little bit longer just so I can get a sort of league shows on the side, and then it's a little bit like that. Cool. That's fine by me. Then once I have all this stuff, then I can just make this look a little bit cleaner, and I can just do this stuff over time. So what you can see is you have our draws. Our home wins by year, which looks a little bit messy. Maybe we want to add in our draws and our aways, but I think clearly you can see that there's a clear dip in terms of our 2020/21. Maybe we can add a line of best fit. So we're going to go to analytics here, and then when you go to constant line or average line, we can add an average line in there, for example, in here. So we're just going to press that, and we're just going to press this to be table like that. Then what you can see here is our average line just shows our average over the time, and you can see here clearly that our season 20/21 falls severely under the line. If I make this a little bit bigger, I probably could make this the full screen actually, just to make this a clear dashboard. You can see here, if we just make that smaller, we can get this whole thing in there, like so. You can see here clearly that our COVID season is one of the seasons that falls under the average, and clearly is the most under the average of any of our years, and is our worst year by far, which shows that the number of home wins and the home advantage had decreased during COVID times. You can see here, as you say, our 6-year period of our pre-period is what we're going to discuss next, and our post-period to answer our pre and post bit. But we can take this as our first little graphic in there. What you can then do is we've allowed our people who are using our dashboard to filter this by league. So, for example, Bundesliga, you can have a look in there. There's not really any clear difference. It does actually go down slightly, where you can see here it's under them. Actually, both our COVID seasons are there, but our lowest is actually 24/25. So, we can have a look at. I think the Championship is one of the ones that was the least prominent in terms of our differences. So there you go, for example, there again, 41%, so it isn't actually too far below average, but again, it is below average. You can have a look at La Liga, for example. Again, now that season is below average. And you can do this basically for all the leagues in there that you want to do for. Obviously, our Premier League we've already done. You can do it for the Scottish Premiership. You can do it for all different leagues in there, where again, it's our lowest year. So you can clearly see that year is the most prominent year, and that home advantage did decrease. We can't say, essentially, something in stats is that correlation doesn't equal causation. We can't say that this value went lower because there was no fans, but it's quite a clear indicator that this could be an important factor in the case. So this is our home wins by year. I might want to change that actually to make that home win percentage by year, so we can go and change that on the actual sheet. So if we go here and just home win percentage by year, if we just go to here, just rename it and home win percentage by year. There you go, I'm happy with that for our initial sheet. We can then go to hide all sheets. Normally we'd have more than one just on the sheet, but I think it's quite a cool little graphic to have there as our clear indicator. Answers the question within seconds. Obviously you can filter that by year and league if needs be. So for example, if I want to just have a look at 2016-17, then I can quickly have a look at this thingy. But obviously it's quite irrelevant for this sort of sheet, that filter, but we need it later on in our sheets if needs be. We can bring it in. Because what I'm going to do now is if we just go and hide all sheets and go to this one that we just hidden, then what we're going to do is we're just going to apply this, both of these, we're going to apply to worksheets, select the worksheets, and we're just going to pick all the ones that we want in here. So just all the worksheets in our book, press OK, and that'll basically continue the filter over to every single worksheet. We can hide that in there, and our next dashboard is going to be our pre-post analysis. So again, we're going to make this into automatic. Then once you got that, then we're going to do we've got our pre-post figures, our post period figures, and our pre versus post. So pre-post figures. post period figures, and pre-post. So you can clearly see an instant graphic there. Again, this isn't as clear in terms of making this any graphical difference, but I don't think we need to as such, because I think most of it answers itself in there. Again, you can do the same for this in here. This actually might be a bit easier to do this tiled because you're just putting 3 different dashboards on a screen. Pre-period, post-period, and our pre versus post, and just rescale just to make so you're happy with it. Something around about there is probably what you want. You probably hide this as such. You don't really want that in there. So what we can do is maybe get rid of our post-period pre-period. So if we go to our post-period figures, we don't really want this to be in there if we can, because yeah, that won't work. It's quite irritating, but we'll come back to that later on. It's not the most important thing. But this is our pre versus post, and then we're going to just have this color coded. But basically, you can see that kind of tells everybody. See, it was 45% beforehand, then it went 25% for a draw, 31. It's not really changed by much. It's only 1% up, which is obviously very, very small in this grand scheme of things. That tells us everything that we need to know in that one. Then we can simply go to, I've just got a PowerPoint by accident. We can then do the same thing. What we're now going to do is look at our COVID season. We're going to hide all sheets in there. Then we're simply going to take our COVID season, and we're going to go COVID versus pre. And that'll tell us everything we need to look at. So we're going to put our COVID year in there. We're going to make this automatic. And then we're just going to do our COVID pre versus COVID, like that. And I think what we'll do here is maybe just convert this, or pre-period versus COVID. Can we show this as a graph to make it look slightly better? I think that looks a bit more visual in there. Maybe rotate this round. Like that. And that just gives us everything we need. You might want to color these ever so slightly differently. So you might want to say, for example, color by our 3 things in here. So obviously you can just categorize these as our COVID versus pre values, and then you can sort of just have an idea of the colors. So red, obviously amber and green. To do this, all we're going to do is take this measure values thing. You want to press control and then just grab it, and then you want to keep it in the rows, but also add it as a color. And then all you're going to do here is we're going to right click on this, edit color. Then clearly what we want to do is we want to have a red green divergent. We have this as 5 steps if needs be, or 4 steps should do, and maybe go for 6 steps. I don't know. I would normally go for advance. Your center point obviously needs to be 0, and then simply just press OK, and that'll then do this all by color for you, as you can see there. I think that looks a little bit better than what we saw before. You can add labels on there if needs be to show marks, but obviously then I think it's better. And you can just make sure that your axes is shown as percentages as well. So you want this to be custom, and then obviously automatic, but then include 0. That's fine. The only issue is it's shown as 0.00 rather than shown as percentages, which is a little bit irritating. And to fix that, all we need to do is right click, press format. If you go to your numbers and you go to percentage, and you can just go to something like that, I think should do. It's not really important that you have the 0.00s in there. I'm just going to do the exact same thing for our post-COVID. So again, just to do this really, really quick this time, we're going to have it as this. Then we're going to rotate that. Oh, I've just got that in the way now, but we'll just get rid of it. Just press the X button. Apologies. We're just going to flip these round as we said before. Measure values. Then we're going to do this. Measure values as color. Then again, do red, green, divergent. Again, I'm flying through this now because you've just seen me do it, but in there, red, green, divergent, advance, center equals 0, okay, does everything we need in there, add a label and show label marks. Once you've done that, again, what we're going to do here is format the axes, format in there, then you can do your numbers, 2 percentages, get rid of that in there, and then bosh, you're done. Again, we're going to make this into entire view, just to make it look a little bit cleaner. Again, we'll make this into entire view to make it look a little bit cleaner. And once you got that, you can just then input that into your COVID versus pre and COVID versus post. So we want our COVID year, so we can have a look at our metrics in there so you can see the sort of value we're looking at. You might want to include our pre data in there as well. So we're going to unhide that from what we needed before. So if you go back to pre versus post, we're going to unhide all sheets, and then we're just going to make sure that in our where is it, over here, COVID versus pre, we want to get our pre data as well. So pre-period, wherever it is, pre-period figures, we're going to put them in there as well. So something like that. And then obviously that's fit width currently. We're going to drop these both this down slightly, just to ensure that we can get both of our figures in there. So again, this should hopefully fit in there. And there you go. And as you can see now, that's very, very visual. You can see here clearly it was at 40%. I've done it again. 40% went to 25%, then went to 35%. Then you can see 45, 25, 30. Again, I want to try and get rid of this pre-period and post-period if I can, because it's quite irritating. But you get the point. You can see COVID versus pre is down 5%, and COVID versus pre-away is up 5%. And then we can do the same thing for our post period very, very simply. So all we're literally going to do is just hide all sheets in there, and then we're just going to duplicate that, obviously, for the next thing. So again, just do this as COVID versus post. And again, we're going to use the same thing here. So you want post period versus COVID at the bottom. Again, make this automatic. We don't want this in there. I don't really care about that. So that's fine. We want our post-period figures at the top, but above that, we want to unhide our COVID year period, and we just want to do our COVID year figures as well in there like that. That gives us everything we need again there, exactly what we wanted. Nice and easy. If I didn't stop pressing off the sheet, because it's not full screen, so it's quite irritating, so I do apologise. And again, I think that tells us everything that we need to see. So what we're going to do now is just try and get rid of this post and pre-period, if we can do, because it looks a bit daft. We can hide all sheets, and I think that now should be all sheets that we need. Hide all sheets. And now, as you can see now, we've got our 4 different dashboards in there that tell us everything that we need to see. Potentially we can do our pre versus post in that sort of way as well if needs be. We can just do that now. So if you just press here and press go to sheet, we'll do the same thing again, make it look a little bit more graphic, but again, it's nothing of major concern. I'm just a bit concerned that this looks like it's more than it is. But then if you just do this again, just flip it in there. Obviously, I might just set this to the same sort of threshold this is at. So for example, in here, the axis is prefixed, and we can just do a custom one in here. So for example, in this one, you can see it goes from -6 to -6. I'm going to change this one as well, actually. So we're going to format this axis. Sorry, we're going to edit this axis. I'm going to make them all fixed to be 6% to -6%. Just makes it a little bit better in there. So we're going to go for -0.06 to 0.06. For all of them in there. So as you can see here, edit axes, custom, -0.06 to 0.06. Actually, I might do it a little bit higher, because as you can see, that's actually cutting off that. So we're going to go to 0.07 just to make sure we're actually getting the 6 in there, to make it obvious, because obviously if it's only going up to 4, then it kind of defeats the purpose. There you go. That's what we want in there. We'll do the same thing for this one. And by doing this, it means we just compare our graphs very, very simply, because you have the same sort of axis size in there, and then therefore it just makes it a bit easier to compare in there. Again, the sizes are a bit off here, so I'll show you how to fix that in a minute. We'll do the same thing here, but we're just going to format axes in there. Actually, I'll go to the actual sheet. If we go to sheet, then what we're going to do is just edit axes, put this to be -0.07. 0.07. Obviously, this will be way less dramatic in there. Our measure values can again be used as our colors in there. Again, we're going to go edit colors, and then we're going to go to step. Once you go to step, you want to go to 6. You get the gist now. Red, green, divergent, advanced, center 0, okay, like that. Add our data labels as points. Once you have that, then you want to go to formatting our axes. You can format that, and you can just convert numbers to percentages, and then 0, 0, which I clearly didn't do. Oh, sorry, that's the pain. The axes, sorry, as percentages, and then 0, 0. in there like so. Again, you can make this an entire view like that, and then you can go back to here. That'll hide itself, and you've got everything you need. We want to make all these the same size, so all we're going to do that, as you can see in our layout page, we want to make these the same sort of size for all 3 pages, just to ensure that we're getting everything the same size. So the perfect one we got at the minute is our pre versus post COVID like this. Want to make sure this, so this is 8.8, so we're just going to press on here, and we're going to press this to be 8.8, it already is. Then we want a width of 141 and a height of 151. So we're going to change the height in there to 151. And make this float, and I'm just going to press 151. 8, 8. What number was that? That was 1141. Like so. And then for our next thing in here, which was this thing here, you can see this is 8159. Floating. So we go 8159, 1141, and the height this time of 135. Obviously, naturally, you want to make these things the same height, so that one's actually a height of 151. So I think we can actually reduce the height of that to about 140. What's in the middle of that? Just go back on what that was: 151 and 135. 16 between them, so 8, so 143 for both of them. It's probably about fair. So height of 143 like that, and then again a height of 143 in that one. That means the Y might have to change ever so slightly, but we'll figure that out when we get to it. Then this bottom one here is 8294. It's just me being nitpicky now, but this is actually exactly how I like it. So floating 8294. I'm guessing 1141, and height this time of 431. And just like that, there you go, perfect. Apart from I keep pressing off it, there you go. So now what we're going to do is recreate those sizes for all of them in here. So again, we're going to make these into floating. I've got all the figures that I need now, so we'll just start with our first one. It was 881141 and 143, I believe. And our next one, if we go on to it now, it was 8159. 1141 and 143. Again, this is me being nitpicky, but this is just the way that I do my job in terms of, like, I like having attention to detail is quite a pivotal part of my job. 8294, so again, make it floating. 8294, 1141, and what height was it again? 431 or something like that. Oh, what a memory that is. 431. And then our last page, we'll do the exact same there. I don't even know if I can remember these now, but let's try and do it off the top of my head. So it should be 881141 143. The next one should be 8159 1141 143, I think. Let's double check that. There you go. And the last one is 8294. So it should be floating 8294 1141 431, I believe. And there you go. Now they're all exactly the same sizes. When you change between the sheets, it shouldn't change. I'm going to do a little bit of analysis, formatting in there, and just change these to be in the middle. I just prefer like in the middle personally because I don't know, just do. You might want to underline them if needs be, but I think it's pretty clear here what we're doing. But for the purpose of this, we'll just underline it just to make it obvious. Bold and underline all of these as such. Bold and underline. Again, it's quite monotonous and quite boring, but it needs to be done. As you can see, I'm happy with that. And we can go to the next sheet and do the exact same thing. So, center line, bold, underline, okay. and then do the same thing here. So center line, bold, underline, okay. Then we can go back to COVID versus post and do the same thing on this one here. Center line, bold, underline, okay, and there you go. So obviously now everything's the same size. It looks a bit cleaner in there. So it just means if we are going to publish this, and what you would naturally do is just flick between these sheets, and it shouldn't look that much different, if that makes sense, because they are all the same size in there. The only annoying thing is having this pre-period true and false. I'm going to try and get rid of that just now, but I think this is quite clear in terms of showing the different impacts of them, because you can see they're all on the same scale. Therefore, you can see a lot quicker what you need to see in terms of your data. Everything's there you need to see, and our raw data obviously shows our home advantage, which is the most important thing in our question of interest in this part. Hope this makes sense what I'm trying to say. What I'm going to do now is just fix that bit. I'll show you how I fix it. And then I'm going to show you the results, and that should hopefully show you exactly how I work as a data analyst. I'm sorry if this is a long video, but hopefully it's worth it for you in the long run. I don't know if I'm just being daft and how I didn't even think of this. I've just suddenly thought when I went to the page, surely I have the pre-period fixer true, so if I just get rid of the pre-period from the rows, I should be fine. There you go. I didn't even know why I didn't think of that before. It's the most easiest solution in the world. I've literally, for reference, I didn't even pause the video. I just went straight to doing it. I can get rid of that. I didn't even remember I'd even put those in there. And there you go. Looks a lot cleaner now. And again, if I just go back to these two sheets now, this looks a lot better. So you can actually see a clear comparison. The 40 goes straight to the 45, and then the 5%'s there. Potentially, if I get rid of value in there, if that's of any interest, I can just remove the header. But then obviously that then removes that in there. What I can just do is edit axes, and if I just go to title, I can fix it as custom, and I can just kind of get rid of it if it needs to be. Because I don't really want a title, and therefore it keeps these more aligned. I can do the same thing for these ones in here. So again, edit axes, and I can just go to custom title, get rid of that in there. Or you could have it saved as percentage difference, but we already know what it is. So potentially, as I say, if you want to be a bit more clear, but I think it's fairly clear what we've already got in there. But if you want to be really, really nitpicky, put that as percentage difference in there. And there you go. That's everything that we needed. All I would do now is obviously I would release this dashboard onto our servers, and people could then access it, or I can send them a link to it. But in the purpose of our ones, I'm just going to show this how I would do it in terms of adding to our PowerPoint. I'll come back to once I did it, and hopefully the results should answer everything that our questions of interest do with us. I'm just thinking as well now, if you want to be interesting to answer some of these questions better, you could also, if we go back to here, obviously we've got the colors by the pre-post period, you can actually recreate this. So if we just unhide this sheet and I just go to home percentage by year, we can just duplicate this and we can just do by year, by league. And then essentially what I would do is, rather than having the color as the pre-post period, so I would actually remove that in there, and I would just change this to league. And then you can just do this in here. Looks a bit messier in there, but you can get a sort of breakdown of all the different leagues you have in there. Obviously, you'd show, you'd want to show the filter as such. So you want to show highlight league in there by accident. But if you actually go to analysis and then go to legends, and then go to Color Legend League, you can get it in there. So you can see that if needs be, if that's something that's interesting to you, you can see sort of the differences in there. You might want to then do it the other way around. So our year on the bottom and that bit on the top. And then you can see how impactful they are. I don't know if that's anything that interests you as such. Or you could even have the league along the bottom. And then you could have the year, potentially. And you'd have the year as the image as such. So you can see there all the different years here. So you have all your different years and what sort of size they are and stuff. But again, it's personal preference. I think potentially that actually looks like a decent graphic in there if you want to have a look at the specific years and the different leagues, for example. Or you could, as I said, you could have potentially the leagues along the bottom if that interests you, and you could have sort of the years and as the percentages along the top, and sort of have it that way. It's personal preference, as I say. You have the year as the color, but then we can have that in there if needs be. As with the dashboard, all we do is just hide all sheets, make another one. It's exactly the same as this. We just duplicate this, and we would just call this raw data by league. And just so we can basically answer one of the questions of interest, I just suddenly thought, we're just going to get rid of this, and we're just going to put this one in instead, and we're just going to keep that in there as our colors. we're just going to put our league up there somewhere, our year up there somewhere, make it a bit cleaner, a bit tidier. Drag that along ever so slightly. So it's about halfway, and that should answer everything that we need. You might want to put this up there, maybe actually give us a bit more room on that side. But I say it looks a bit messy, so we'll just leave it down the side like that if I didn't keep pressing that. There you go. Then what we're going to do is just hide our sheets, and then maybe we might actually make this one into a tiled sheet. So just going to get rid of this now, as we say. We're going to unhide the worksheet like we see, add that in there. And again, do the same thing with year and leagues. I don't normally like to go for a floating sheet, but that's only really when I'm doing things the same sort of size or want to add things to graphics. But we'll just do that in there and just make sure that's the same order as this. No, this is league then year, so we're going to just change the order of these and put year this side of league just to make it consistent. Again, we want the sort of sizes of these to be important. So league is 88, 582, and 75. 88, 582, and 75. So 8, 8, 582, 75. And our year in there is 598, 559, 75. 598. What number was it again? I don't remember. 559, 75. And 75. Then we want this to match our raw data. So that's 8, 883, 1141, and 642. 883, 141, 642. I might be completely wrong with that, but we'll find out in a second. Oh, I was right. There you go. Then we're going to hide this. Sorry, we're going to hide this sheet. And there you go, that is our entire dashboard done. Hopefully, that sort of gives you the idea of what we're looking at in there. Actually, I'm going to do a little difference here because obviously this equals the sum, but obviously our average home will equal something a little bit higher in there. That makes sense. But you can see 16, 17 was our highest. You can see the reason these numbers are a bit higher is because it's the sum of all of our leagues. If that makes any sense. Again, raw data by league. Now you can't see the thing, so what we're going to do is just bring this in ever so slightly, actually, to about there. Then we can have that as such. If I keep pressing that one more time, then you can see now we've got our league. You might want to make this the full length, maybe. If that makes any better or worse. And there you go. That answers everything that we need to answer. Potentially, you could, as I say, you could do this the other way around, where you got your leagues along the bottom. So I might just do that for the purpose of the video. So unhide all sheets. So this video is never going to end. I do apologize, and just do this as by league by year. I know that sounds ridiculous, but by league by year. And then literally what we're going to do instead is just do year as this thing. Then we're going to do leagues as this thing. And then hopefully to do the same thing. There you go. Again, we're going to make this a little bit neater in there because it looks not ideal in terms of reading these things. So if we can make this entire view look a bit nicer, there you go. So you can see La Liga has the highest average in terms of that, and you can see the different years in there, starting from the more recent ones at the bottom. I want to flip that around actually and sort the year from. No, because in this instance it will change everything else. So what we'll do is we're just going to hide all sheets. We're just going to duplicate that sheet. The only thing is now I'm going to have to do all that graphics again, and then this one by year. And literally all you want to do is just change this to this. So literally get rid of this and pop in this. And again, show this down the side, like so. And then we're going to do all this stuff again. Fun time. So we're going to go to layout 88588270. So which one's first? League 88588270. Floating 88582 and 70. Our year is 598 559 70. I can't actually remember what it was. 598. 55970, I think. then the actual graph is 883 floating 883, not 1141 because it cuts off a bit, so 976, and the height is 642. Another 385, 976. And finally, our little legend thing is 989. If I can find it, I can't actually get to it, which is a bit irritating. There you go. Floating, and then we want this to be wrong way. 989. 83, 160, 610. And there you go, perfect. And I think that finally is a completed dashboard or report that you can see here. It has the raw data that answers our question initially. We then get a split by year, by league. Then we've got by league by year, and then we have our pre versus post, our COVID versus pre, and our COVID versus post. And now that should answer everything that we set up in the beginning bit. Let's go back to our PowerPoint now, and I'll show you exactly how we've done this. Okay, so as I said, that brings us on to step number 4, which is the results. And what you'll see now is we can answer all of these results without even saying a single word or with our graphics. Obviously, naturally, we will reply with an email and say, please find attached the following either Excel worksheet, or in this instance, please find below the link to the Tableau report, for example, or find a PDF of the Tableau report. Please find it attached, and you can start displaying stuff as we can do there. But all I'm going to do in this video is just show you how our graphics can answer all the questions that were asked in the initial thing. So this was our initial email that we were sent all the way back at the start, and it was basically asking this query. Hi, could you please look at where the home advantage in football has changed since COVID, mainly around the time of matches being played without fans. In particular, we'd like to find out home teams winning fewer matches since COVID compared to before. Does any change seem temporary or permanent, and are leagues affected differently, e.g. Premier League versus La Liga? They're not great at Excel, so any simple charts and stats pulled together really helpful. Thanks again, and talk soon. Simply all we've done is let's have a look at the 3 questions that we were asked in this thing. So we were asked, are home teams winning fewer matches since COVID compared to before? Does any change seem temporary or permanent? And are leagues affected differently? I think we've answered all 3 of those questions with the graphics we made, and they aren't too difficult to understand, and we can probably answer them without even saying a single word. So starting off with our first one here is, are home teams winning fewer matches since COVID than before? Clearly you can see that the answer is no. There's no difference really in terms of our pre and post period, but you can see clearly in that COVID season there was an impact, and therefore since COVID hit, there was obviously fewer home teams were winning matches, as you can see here, but it seemed to rectify itself in there. So the short answer to this question is no, but there was an impact in the COVID year. We can also see, if we compare these, you can see clearly here, since COVID compared to before, our COVID year versus pre-period, you can see it was a 5% difference, whereas our COVID year versus our post-period is at a 4% difference. You can see clearly our pre and post-period aren't too different, but clearly that COVID season was a very vast difference to what we'd expected before and what we expect since in terms of that. Our next question was, does any change seem temporary or permanent? That was our next point in there. And as you can see here, it seems like it was temporary. It literally was what we call in the industry as a pulse, where literally it dipped for the COVID season and it rose back up to what we expected. As you can see here, there's only a 1% difference between our pre and post periods compared to the 5 and 4% differences we saw in our COVID season. So therefore, there's nothing extremely different that we can see in terms of any data in there. Our final question we were asked was, are leagues affected differently? As you can see here, we've got a breakdown here. So you can see, for example, in 2016-17, you can see all of our periods here. Obviously, this doesn't really show our league. Our leagues are obviously shown in the colours there, so there's no clear indication there. We can see most of these numbers are fairly consistent in there, but the most important graphic is the next one here. So you can see clearly La Liga has the greatest majority in there, as you can see by all the different leagues, all the different years, sorry. And for example, the Serie A or English Championship are the lowest, but all leagues are affected differently. And you're probably saying not really. There seems to be a fairly consistent pattern over all of these leagues, where you can see the certain sort of years that there's been a smaller value, which is probably our 2020/21, which is our yellow one, which seems to be the smallest of all the values in there. And therefore, again, if you just go back to this point here, again, what you could then do at this point is then you can also show them the fact that you can filter this one by the league or the year, and that would answer our final question in there. And so hopefully this shows you exactly how a data analyst would approach this, and shows you how to use Tableau and how you can use Excel as well to get all the data that you need. Hope this has been interesting, and hope that answers the question: has home advantage gone before or after COVID? Essentially, home advantage is not gone. Home advantage is still completely there, exactly how it was before, and we can conclude there was a slight dip during COVID. It seems fairly consistent over a number of different leagues to show that indicator, and therefore we can say that home advantage has not gone. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If you're interested in something like this, again, please like and subscribe. If you haven't been interested in the longer form content, I will be posting a short content. Although, if you're not interested in longer content, you wouldn't have made it this far in the video, but you get the point. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you for the next question in the next video.